I'm shooting this video upon request, basically cataloging thoughts I have on lifting, training, what my philosophy is, what my perspective is. Background, who I am. I compete as a 181 pound lifter in NASA, compete as a 198 as well. My present best lifts include a 485 pound squat, 342 pound bench press, and 584 pound deadlift. The squat and the deadlift at 181, the bench press at 198. Best bench for 181 was a 319. I've been training off and on for a long time. I started lifting, quote unquote, at 14, doing the whole bench curl thing. Wrestled in high school, dislocated my shoulder at 16, and started taking up lifting as more of a rehab at that point, just kind of getting the shoulder back in the socket. Became a little bit smarter about it when I was in college. Started doing mixed martial arts, boxing, and used lifting to supplement that. Then, when I graduated, kind of hung up the gloves and decided to pursue lifting full time. I was not really a good fighter. I'm not necessarily a great lifter, but it was something I was better at. I'm horribly uncoordinated, so I like something where I don't have to worry about having to dodge or move. I can lay down for a third of my powerlifting meet. So it suits me. What my experiences have dictated and what beginners screw up. The big things are that no one wants to admit they're a beginner, honestly. Everyone wants to be an intermediate. And it's really one of those words that I wish we could just strike from the language. Everyone wants to move on from that beginner phase and claim to be an intermediate. It's a comfortable thing to say because it means that you've got some experience under your belt, but you're not that great. And everyone's okay with admitting that. But the reality is, very few people even make it to that phase. Most people are beginners their whole career, and that's not a bad thing. A beginner is a great thing to be because what it means is that you can progress every time you go to the gym. Anytime you get under that bar, you can be stronger than yesterday. That's an amazing thing to be. One of my biggest flaws was not being willing to escape that part of my training. For years, I followed beginner programs. For years, I followed what were called hard gainer programs, despite the fact that I was honestly very able to put on fat and muscle. I followed things like 20 rep squats, abbreviated training from Stuart, McRobert, and Braun, all the stuff from Pavel. I loved abbreviated training. My philosophy being that if this stuff will put on muscle and strength for people that have trouble gaining it, it should be amazing for people that, can put on muscle and strength relatively easily. It was successful. I did put on a lot of weight. I did get really fat. I got up to 217 pounds at my absolute highest and, absurdly high body fat percentage. But I was also relatively strong. I'm stronger now having cut the weight. But at age 21, I had a 540 pound deadlift, 420 squat, and a 365 touch and go bench press. God only knows what it would have been legit, but something still I was pretty happy with. Kind of getting off on a tangent here, but that's the goal of this. So being a beginner, following these kind of programs, it's an amazing thing. And if you really come to terms with the fact that you are a beginner, that you can progress at the gym every time, if you embrace that, you'll make tremendous gains. If you spend your whole time trying to satisfy your ego, telling yourself, I'm an intermediate lifter, I'm too good for these beginner programs, in your head, I'm sure you're going to love, being able to tell everyone I'm an intermediate lifter. But that's the thing, you're going to have to tell everyone that because no one's going to believe it looking at you. You're just going to be this scrawny, skinny, fat, or fat guy who has no ability to be recognized for their accomplishments. But if you come to terms with being a beginning lifter and follow simple programs that are based around the basics, that are just focused on getting you as big and strong as fast as humanly possible, you'll see tremendous gains. Put the ego aside. If you need to write in a notebook every day, I'm an intermediate lifter, I'm an intermediate lifter. If that gets it in your head, fine, but follow a fucking beginner program and get some good results. Other things people screw up is just changing stuff. I understand there's this human desire that, hey, I want to have fun when I train, but really, the fun happens outside of training. If you do this for vanity, the fun happens when people recognize your accomplishments without you having to bring them up. When people tell you that you look big, that you look strong, that you look fit, that you look healthy, when you get this kind of social validation, there's the fun. You don't need that in the gym. In the gym is where you earn that social validation. If you're doing this for athletics, again, the fun happens when you're crushing people in whatever activity you do. When you can win just by sheer force of will and strength, regardless of skill, that's fun. That's been my experience. Because again, I'm not the most coordinated guy. I'm terribly uncoordinated. But when I did fight, if I did win, it's because I could just completely crush someone with how strong I was and just enforce my will on them. That's fun. You don't need Bosu ball training or flexibility or ridiculous kitschy gym shit that they put out there to entertain you. Just stick with the basics. Become an absolute monster on simple things. If you can press your body weight overhead for multiple reps, if you can deadlift huge multiples of your body weight for reps, people are going to notice. And who cares if you think these movements are fun or not? The fun happens because you finally are big and strong and people can recognize this. If you don't modify your program, if you just stick with the basics and every day focus on making this one lift that you do, owning it and making it something that you progress on, you're going to see the results. If one day you bench press and then the next day you do dumbbell bench press because that sounds like fun, and then the next day you switch to a Swiss bar, and then you switch to with chains, and then you do dips, and you just never pick one thing, you're just going to suck at a lot of things rather than be good at one thing. There's this myth of zero carryover between movements. And don't get me wrong, I think specificity is key. I think everyone should try to mimic the exact movements they want to do in their activity. But at the same time, personal example, I never did an overhead press. And part of that was just fear of my shoulder. I just did not trust it after dislocating it. So for years, all I did was bench press. And once again, with my background of just bench and curls from age 14 on, I had a decent bench press at a young age and eventually got up to a 300-pound touch-and-go bench press at around 19 or so. The first time I went to overhead press, I was able to overhead press 135 relatively easily. I don't really recall where I hit a snag after training for that point, but it's a movement that most people have to work up to, and for me, it was just what I could start with. Having done no overhead pressing, just doing bench pressing still contributed to the overhead press. So everyone that thinks, oh, I wanna do dips because they have better carryover to X, or I get more aesthetic results from benching than I do from incline benching, what have you. If you just get fucking strong at being able to push something or pull something, it will carry over into pushing and pulling other things. It's this myth that beginners are wrapped around that for some reason the basic movements aren't going to give them their goals. Now, I'll admit, I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not interested in bodybuilding. I've done a little reading on it. It's not my area of expertise. And sure, there is some benefit to some sculpting work to get a more specifically detailed physique, but most beginners don't have muscles to sculpt. They start out as just mush, and all they're focused on is, I gotta throw in 3 sets of curls and some medial delt work and work on my outer quad sweep and develop all the 3 heads of what have you. And no, you gotta fucking get big first. You have to actually have muscle in order to shape it. It's just ridiculous. Your focus should just be on becoming this monster. It's really what it boils down to. And everyone will counteract with, well, my goal isn't to be all that big. I don't want to be all that strong. And I say, fine, but why not take the fastest method to get to not being that big? Analogy I'm famous for using is the analogy of the car and the pogo stick. So you want to get to the grocery store, and you have 2 modes of transportation, the car and the pogo stick. The car is the most obvious choice. And you might counter with, well, the grocery store's not that far. It's only a mile away, so I don't need the car. I can just take the pogo stick. But that's fucking crazy. It's really the only way to put it. And when you use this analogy, it's obvious. Well, yeah, the car is the best choice. But when it comes to lifting, people will use the justification all the time. Well, my goals aren't to be all that big, so I can use X program. Why would you take a more inefficient path to get to the same goal when you can just get to that goal as fast as possible and then be done with it? Perhaps it's me personally. Perhaps it's that I don't see training as really all that fun. I enjoy training, but more so because I enjoy what it does for me. But other people are so fixated on having fun while they train and enjoying the process that they forget that the point is to eventually reach goal A. And you hear the excuse, well, this is a lifelong pursuit, but really it's not. If you only want to put on 10 pounds, that should not take your lifetime. If it took you 40 years to put on 10 pounds of muscle, hang yourself. I mean, really, what else could you say? Something went tragically wrong in your life plan. And if you can't figure out how to get from A to B in sub 40 years when it's that menial of a goal, you might have some sort of fundamental misunderstanding of just the basics of life. And perhaps looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, lifting should not be in your perspective. Maybe you should focus on things like your job, or eating, or simple reproduction, or breathing, or making sure that you don't jump into the tub with the toaster on. I mean, it just blows my mind. And once again, the goal of this was to go off on a rant, and this has been what has happened. But it's simple. To summarize, admit that you're a beginner. And admit this for as long as possible. Because realize that this is a positive thing. You have the ability to get bigger and stronger every time you get onto the bar. There are people right now at elite levels that would murder people for that ability, that they lost long ago because they have become so powerful that they cannot do this. But you are at the most amazing point in your training career. You will never be able to enjoy this again. So enjoy it to the fullest extent possible and utilize this period by picking basic movements that will have the biggest effect, the biggest carryover, and becoming an absolute monster on them. Don't stress about how your bench press might not carry over to your dip, which might not carry over to your overhead press. Just become big and strong on these movements, and when the time comes to specialize, specialize. But it's not now. Once you become that big and strong guy, find a new goal. Sure, look at CrossFit, look at bodybuilding, look at strongman, look at Olympic lifting, look at powerlifting, look at something, but build that foundation first. Realize that the point of the training is to accomplish a goal. If your goal is to have fun in training, fine. That is your goal. Go do whatever you want. Go to the gym and jump on Bosu balls and do curls for 70 sets until your arms explode. But realize that meeting the goal of fun is going to take away from the goal of actual progress. If your goal is progress, realize that you're going to have to minimize fun at some point, that you really are just going to have to suck it up, get sweaty, and have life suck for about an hour. And then life sucks for an hour, and then for the other 23 hours, life can be awesome. That minor sacrifice is worth the positive gains you get. If nothing else, you gotta have a game plan before you go in, have a goal, and meet it. And don't pick the most inefficient way to get there if you're not willing to take the fact that you're not going to get there, most likely. Use the best plan to meet your goals. I'll try shooting another one of these if it gets any positive feedback. Thanks.